Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is me. This is the fifth installment of Solo Thoughts, where I forgo a guest and talk directly to you, the listener, about ideas that I've been developing. I welcome feedback on any of these thoughts, and you can do so on our new Solo Community Slack channel, which is invite only. Apply on the Solo page at petermcgraw.org. So here we go, or as I like to say, let's get started. In the 50th episode of Solo, the one that looks backwards and forwards at the project, I present an idea that singles who don't want to settle down, whether it be for now or forever, they need more than a how-to guide. They need a way to structure their thoughts and actions. They need a story, a narrative. Now, when I first started this project, I thought that Joseph Campbell's hero's journey would be a good narrative. In episode 24, I talk about this. Are you the hero of the story of your life? And I immediately, because of my guest, began to have second thoughts. You see, the hero's journey tends to be external first, a need to leave the safe confines of the hero's world. And it's often accompanied by an internal change, but most of the action is in the physical, slaying dragons, conquering villains, and the like. Right? So this comes up, for example, in Star Wars, where Luke Skywalker has to leave his home planet to begin his hero's journey, and then eventually destroy the Death Star. Spoiler alert. I think that the evolution of the unattached person, however, is one of internal change first, and then action later. And that'll make more sense as I go on. Nowadays, I'm leaning on an alternative structure, and that is the Virgin's Promise, which is detailed in episode 25, which I call, of course, the Solo's Promise. And it's the application not of the mythological narrative, but actually the fairy tale narrative. And Kim Hudson documents this in her book, The Virgin's Promise. She uses her structure to explain a wide array of stories that don't fit the hero's journey very well, including movies like Legally Blonde, Sister Act, Pretty Woman, About a Boy, and even the comedy Wedding Crashers. So what I'm doing is applying the beats of the Virgin's Promise to a 3-step narrative that I've been working on for you, the single. It's a guide of sorts. It's a new way to think about the change that you might embrace when you embrace single living. So here's the story structure from the Virgin's Promise. I'm going to read these right out loud. And there's 13 steps, so it's going to go on for a little bit of time, so bear with me. So in the first step, the protagonist lives in the dependent world. 2, the protagonist recognizes the price of conformity. That is, he or she can't be their true self. 3, the protagonist is given an opportunity to shine. Perhaps fate intervenes. 4, the protagonist dresses the part. Right, this is most obvious in Cinderella when she first puts on the dress. 5, the protagonist enters a secret world. She or he finds a place to express their real self. For some, it might be this podcast, or even our new Slack channel. 6, the protagonist no longer fits the world and prefers this secret world where he or she can be their true self. 7, caught shining in the dependent world, the protagonist starts to become their true self. And as you might imagine, it causes problems in the ordinary world. People don't like it. They punish. They shame. 8, the protagonist gives up what's keeping her stuck. That is, there's some belief or behavior that needs to go. and it goes. 9. The dependent world's not ready for this change, and so it causes problems. In Kim Hudson's words, the kingdom is in chaos. 10. The protagonist needs to contemplate whether to stay on course with their journey, with their promise. And they often try to figure this out alone on a walk where they wander in the wilderness. 11. Choose her light. That is, there's some action that solidifies the change. There is no going back. 12. Reordering. This is a reconnection with the dependent world, but the protagonist has changed, and as a result, so has that world. And 13, and finally, the kingdom is brighter. Everyone is better off for this reason. So here's a passage from Kim Hudson's book where she recaps the plot of the movie Billy Elliot, which reflects these steps. So if you've seen the movie, you know how compelling the movie is, and you can get a hunch for how it plays out. But even if you don't know the movie, this will sort of give you an idea of what that structure looks like. Billy doesn't do the hero's journey. He engages in this other promise. So Billy lives with his father, brother, and grandmother in a mining town in a small company house. He cares for his grandmother, having recently lost his mother. His father, a miner from a long line of miners, signs Billy up for boxing lessons, where Billy gets pummeled. When asked to give the keys to the ballet instructor after boxing, Billy is fascinated by dancing. He tries on his first pair of ballet slippers and attends a class. Billy uses his boxing money to take ballet lessons, practicing in the bathroom, avoiding his family's suspicions. People start to question Billy's sexuality, and Billy's ballet instructor thinks Billy should apply to the Royal Ballet Academy. When Billy's father catches Billy dancing with his homosexual friend, Billy defiantly gives his dad a demonstration of his talent. Billy's dad runs from Billy, and Billy in turn lashes out against his instructor, who's pushing him to follow his dreams. Meanwhile, the brother is arrested and Billy misses his tryout for the Royal Ballet Academy. But Billy's dad, inspired by the memory of his wife, recognizes Billy deserves a chance to follow his passion and crosses the picket line to support him. Unable to go through with crossing the picket line, they sell Billy's mother's jewelry to get money for Billy to try out in London. Billy almost blows his chance by hitting a fellow dancer who tries to be quote-unquote friendly in the change room. But Billy finally stands up and describes how he feels when he dances and is accepted into the academy. The son of a miner has become a famous dancer, and the father and brother are exposed to a more tolerant and artistic world. Billy follows, in this story, 13 out of 13 of those steps. Okay, so here's my attempt to simplify this narrative for the solo, and I do it in 3 stages. And as you hear these, you'll recognize some of those beats from the solo's promise. Here are the 3 stages: recognize, rebel, reinvent. I call them the 3 R's. To recognize our domestication and the prominence of marriage as an important goal to pursue for nearly everyone, and to understand the mythology of marriage. This is a judgment. Next R, rebel. Rebel against this domestication by asserting your wants, needs, and desire to live a remarkable life of your choosing. Get married if you want. Don't get married if you want, but make it your choice. Don't let the world decide for you. This is a decision. And 3, reinvent. Reinvent yourself as someone who lives remarkably, as single by choice, whether that be for now or forever. This is a series of behaviors. So I'll go through each of these R's in turn and talk about them. First, there's this recognition of the world for what it is and its cost to you in your pursuit of a good life. So Kate Hudson would call this the dependent world and the price of conformity. The dependent world and its price is related to the notion of human domestication in Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements. I like the term human domestication, although you could call it a variety of things. You call it socialization and so on, pressure to conform and that be. But I like human domestication because it's provocative. No one likes the idea that they're being domesticated. Yet the world works to shape how we think and how we behave, sometimes in positive ways and sometimes in ways that keep us from thriving. Think of the thoroughbred. Not a bad life in some ways. You get to run fast, but a thoroughbred doesn't run free. Domesticated or not, Homo sapiens are different than other animals. And those animals may be domesticated or not. So what separates Homo sapiens, humans, from other animals? Now, most people think it's a language, but it's not. Many other animals have language, they can communicate with others. Other people think it's intelligence. Nope. Many other animals are smart themselves, though, of course, intelligence does help. Rather, what separates humans from other animals is our unique ability to cooperate. Now, animals can cooperate in some limited capacity, often through reciprocity. So, for example, an ape will groom another ape, and then vice versa. Right? I groom you, you groom me. I give you a ride to the airport, and next time you give me a ride to the airport. But Homo sapiens cooperation is not limited to reciprocity. It can have another structure, and it goes something like this. You groom me, and I give you a ride to the airport. And what's fascinating is this cooperation isn't just one-on-one. It can happen at scale, in small groups, in thousands of people, and even within states and nations and globally. So getting chimpanzees to cooperate on the individual level might happen here and there, but it can't happen at the tens of thousands of level. You put 10,000 chimps into a stadium and you have bedlam. You put 10,000 humans into a stadium and they can behave. So why does this happen? Why is it that we can cooperate at scale as humans? Well, the short answer, and this serves as the foundation for understanding our domestication, is that we can believe in fictions, in made-up things. These made-up things, they help us get along. They help us cooperate. They're the rules and ideas by which we play the game of life. So what's a fiction? Well, a fiction is anything that will disappear if there's a zombie apocalypse. Laws are fiction. They go out the window. Your college degree is a fiction. No one is going to care where you went to school during a zombie apocalypse. Your number of Instagram followers, i.e. your influence, gone. The things that remain, the things that are biologically and physically based, those aren't fictions, right? People will still need air, water, sustenance. Bullets will still work, and viruses will still exist, unfortunately. But thankfully, sex will still feel good. So it's our ability to share fictions that lead to cooperation in general and has led to the creation of capitalism specifically. And I know that capitalism gets a very bad rap, but in some ways it's really quite good for the world and for singles, and it certainly helps with cooperation because it allows for strangers to interact and do business. So the invention of money, which when you think about it is just a made-up thing. Money has no value during a zombie apocalypse. We all agree on its value. Now, if you want to dive more deeply into these ideas, you can check out the book, The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley and Sapiens by Yuval Harari. I'll put the links in the exhibits. In any case, capitalism has really helped facilitate the steep rise in single living as an option. This is something that we cover in the Best Innovations episode with Shane Moss. So why is it that it helps singles so much? Well, because capitalism can help strangers have our needs met, then we are less reliant on the tribe. We're less reliant on family, and we can break free of those things as single people if we want. So the rise of capitalism helped industrialization, and industrialization has helped singles. So we can escape the farm, in short. Moreover, capitalism, as I've alluded to, has supercharged innovation and invention, which has benefited singles in a variety of ways. Things like birth control, apartment buildings, mobile phones. These are things that help everyone, but can differentially benefit single people and help them live solo. So on one hand, these norms, these rules, these fictions are tremendously helpful. They keep the peace, they fuel innovation, and in some cases, they benefit you and I as we pursue our solo life. On the other hand, however, some of these norms, rules, fictions, they govern our interactions in ways that are arbitrary at best and hurtful at worst. And they certainly can't be right or even right for everyone. And we know this because norms and rules change all the time. What we once thought was okay is now not okay. So, for example, at one point, people were gay by choice, and it was the wrong choice. That is clearly changing. At one point, people believed that women should stay home and cook and have babies. That's changing. They can be doctors, engineers, CEOs, with or without the babies. And certain types of women at one point in time were considered to be witches because of their peculiar behavior. So as this domestication process happens, we're being socialized to accept these rules and follow them. It helps with cooperation. You're socialized to act and believe certain things. For example, you're socialized to believe the relationship escalator and its dominance as the form of acceptable romantic relationships in the world. Idealized, dominant. This is a relationship that you ought to be pursuing. Relationship escalator relationships receive high status and those benefits. They're the focus of media in the marketplace. And they have rituals, engagement rings, and weddings, and so forth. Now, thankfully, being single is a tolerated place in the world, but it's viewed as less than ideal, and certainly less than living on the relationship escalator. And it's the discomfort that you and others feel with your singlehood that's evidence that you're bumping up against this domestication, against these norms. So, as a case study of fictions, cooperation, and changing norms, let's take a little look at marriage, okay? First of all, marriage is a relatively new invention in human history, and the rise of marriage occurred with the rise of land ownership and agriculture. In short, marriage became a way to keep land in a family by passing it on through lineage. We're not involved to marry. It's culturally determined and thus has taken on different forms. Early on, marriages were typically made by the family or by rulers. And the pursuit of love within a marriage is a relatively new thing, sped along by the Enlightenment and the rise of individualism. That is, as we became less focused on duty and more on our individual pursuits. I don't know if you're noticing this, but there's really a fascinating idea here, and that is that the rise of individualism has placed love at the forefront of marriage. But the rise of individualism has also fueled the fact that people aren't getting married because they have other pursuits that they want to engage in. Well, the pursuit of love has made marriage less stable. Obviously, right? Love can fade in ways that duty does not. But other things have been in play that have made the institution of marriage less stable. So access to divorce, the rise of women in the workplace, and now men and women are less dependent on each other, where the man doesn't need to make the money and the woman doesn't need to care for the family. And as I said, these things also has fueled the rise of single living. There's just less need to marry, though for many, the want is still there. So, where are we at? We're talking about recognition. Well, the recognition is to see that marriage was made for families and not for individuals. And it's critical to see past the mythology of marital bliss, something that we've discussed in previous episodes, but I'll recap here. The idea that marriage is the path to a good life simply does not hold up to scrutiny, in part because we see that in the marriage and well-being literature, that the early results was really built on bad science and cherry-picked data. For example, much of the data on the benefits of marriage, it looks so good because the researchers have just thrown out from the sample the people who get divorced. That's a third of the sample. And so it shows a skewed perspective. But I don't need to tell you this. If you're listening, you likely already know from your own personal experience in your own relationships and your observations of your parents, friends, and family, where are these blissful marriages? Sure, they exist, but they're a small percentage, or they only occur for a temporary period of time. Nevertheless, you're living in a world that says marriage is the status quo, and it's built upon fiction, layered and layered and layered. Okay, so first step, recognize your domestication. Recognize that the world you are dependent on and is not necessarily designed for you, the solo, to thrive. It's designed to get you to cooperate, and while there are benefits of cooperation, being able to launch a business, the industrialization that allows you to escape making babies or doing backbreaking work on a farm, nevertheless, if you're aware of it, you can still feel incomplete. Well, now you're aware, but you can do something about it. Once you have this idea, you can start to see this domestication everywhere. For example, I came across this tweet recently by Naval Ravikant. He's at Naval, Naval, on Twitter. He's a pretty fun follow. He writes, "The more neatly you fit into society, the less free you actually are." So before we move on to the next R, I'm going to pause here for a moment and ask you to help get the word out about the podcast. Tell your solo friends and family. Please rate and review. I'm serious. It matters. Okay, after recognition, the next step in the creation of a new narrative for solos is to rebel against the forms of human domestication that don't work for you. A rebellion. You get to be the hero, like in Star Wars. You can start to stop caring what people think of you when you do something that honors your needs, wants, and lifestyle. You don't need to hire your desire for a relationship that deviates from the relationship escalator. You don't need to hide your decision to not want to date at all. You can go to a movie, dinner, or a wedding alone. You can take a solo vacation after a particularly difficult stretch of work. You can be finished being defensive about being single. Perhaps you put single in your social media handle. So this is something that I did with some trepidation. I put bachelor in my social media handles and in some of my bios. And what's really fascinating was I found myself reluctant to do it. And yet, when you spend any time on social media, you regularly see people saying that they're a husband, that they're a father, they're a wife, they're a mother. They put on their relationships in that way on display. And yet, it's unusual for people to announce their singlehood. That was an act of rebellion. And finally, it's important to learn to talk authentically and confidently about being single without apologizing or being on the defensive. Rebels aren't defensive about their rebellion. So how might this sound? So someone may ask, so are you dating anyone special? Answer, no, I'm not dating at all at the moment. Question, you're not dating. How are you going to meet your soulmate? Answer, well, I'm more interested in building my new business than in the rare chance of finding a soulmate. Now, if you wanted to really push the rebellion, you could say something like this. Well, since you're not married to your soulmate, that's obvious. When are you getting a divorce? I'm kidding about that, but you see what I mean. So the act of rebellion, besides allowing you to walk your own path, there's another benefit against rebelling against the status quo, and that is, it's cool. So as you know, getting off the relationship escalator is one of my favorite episodes, as evidenced by the stuff I've talked about previously. But another episode that I really enjoyed quite a lot was with Caleb Warren, my close collaborator on my humor research. Besides studying humor, Caleb has also done groundbreaking work on coolness. That's right. He's used science to figure out what makes things cool. So psychological research shows that cool people find a way to be seen as autonomous, yet appropriate. That is, cool people are deviant by choice, but not too deviant. See where I'm going with this? So when someone's unapologetically unattached, that's cool. Being single by choice is deviant by choice, an unconventional life that you own. Remember, the most uncool people tend to be married. Jay-Z and Beyonce are the exception, of course. People see being single as unconventional, but not terribly so. It's not a crime to be single. And deep down, people know the opportunities present in solo living. To travel, to do what you want, when you want, to sleep in, as I did so today. In other words, the second step in this narrative is an act of rebellion, and that act of rebellion can be cool. The third part of this new narrative is an act of reinvention. To reinvent yourself by shedding thoughts, attitudes, and behavior that's been holding you back, and start to fulfill your promise as a solo. A new unapologetic, celebratory perspective is going to lead to new behaviors. Behaviors that allow you, the single person, to realize your promise. To live the good life, the best life you can. Now, before I get into this, I want to acknowledge the role of privilege, which is why I say the best life you can live. Because of luck, timing, class, gender, orientation, or ethnicity, some people have an easier or harder time living a good life. And so not everybody's good life is equal. And that's why it's conditioned on the one that you're able to achieve. For example, an Ethiopian diamond miner is going to have an impossible time executing the good life that you or I can reach. That doesn't mean that he can't live a good life. It's his good life. Moreover, this act of reinvention is a process. It's not going to happen like that. It's taken me 50 years to live the good life that I'm living. And my good life at age 25 was really quite different. Next, there's no one good life. It depends on your values and lifestyles. What energizes you may not energize me, and vice versa. And lastly, I don't want, as we think about reinvention, to overweight pleasure, or what people would call joy or happiness. It's a good life. It's not a euphoric life. Pleasure matters, but living a good life might actually lead you to forgo pleasure. More about that in a moment. By recognizing the constraints that singles live with and rebelling against them requires a change, perhaps even a makeover. And who doesn't like a good makeover? I think of it in this way. First, you set a foundation, and then you flourish. I'm going to say that again. First, a foundation, then flourish. So if you're a regular listener, you may know my story that I like to tell about the movie Limitless, starring Bradley Cooper. In this movie, Bradley plays a smart guy, a writer who's a bit of a loser. He drinks and procrastinates too much. He's unkempt. And his girlfriend, not surprisingly, dumps him. Somehow he gets access to this genius drug. And he takes this genius drug and becomes super smart with access to everything he's ever learned and gleaned from the world. And so this Bradley Cooper character takes this drug, and what does he do first? He tidies up his apartment. He cleans up and organizes his environment. The next thing he does, and this comes up in a previous episode called Dude, Get a Haircut, he goes to a salon and he gets a fabulous haircut. He walks out with amazing hair. Next, he starts to work out. You see him running and doing sit-ups in the movie. And then he updates his wardrobe. He goes from this sort of schlubby guy into this very good-looking, put-together guy wearing good clothes that fit him well. Okay, why am I bringing this up? Well, if a brand new genius would immediately reinvent himself along these lines, why shouldn't you? So let's talk about this foundation. Much of what Bradley Cooper in the Limitless character was doing was creating a foundation to live a good life, tidying up his environment, his body, and so on. So let me go through each of these things. Now, I just want to say this, this doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to happen all at once. It can be a process that you take some time, that you go through it. But the the four major areas. One is your environment and your look. So tidying up the way that you live and then the way you look. We talked about this in the clothing solo episode. I've got a future episode about tidying up. I just think there's something about cleaning that has not only a freeing feeling, but also then creates this sort of more welcoming space and makes you more appealing to others, and thus you get treated better. The next one, and this one is critical, is tidying up your health. So I call this the tripod, the sort of three major areas for good health: improving your sleeping, improving your eating, and improving your exercise, finding more ways to move. Next, wealth. Find some security in your income and spending. Start by reducing your burn rate. Stop wasting money, at least until you have enough money that you can afford to waste it. Money is important. It's valuable because it will help you buy your freedom. Freedom to do what you want, when you want, and how you want to do it. So get your financial house in order. And then lastly, the last part of the foundation is to have a team. That is to pursue relationships, friendships, and professional relationships that help you live a better life, and remove relationships. Get rid of unsafe people who are physically or emotionally abusive. Find ways to firm up your friendships, repair relationships, and to jettison the bad ones. Okay? So that's the foundation. Now, if you do those things as an act of reinvention, that alone is going to get you ahead of the average person. You're going to have more positivity, less anxiety, more energy, more confidence, greater appeal, you're just going to feel, look, and move through the world in a better way. Now, having set that foundation, you can then seek opportunities to flourish, right? So first foundation, then flourish. And the act of beginning to flourish is to create an orientation towards compelling activities, ones that enhance your life. And this is key. As a single person, you can do more of these compelling activities, you can do them more often, and you can do them better because you're not dividing your time with the obligations of family. So what might some of these activities be? Well, you could learn to DJ. You could do a Tough Mudder race. Maybe you launch a new business. You host a series of dinner parties or game nights. Volunteer in a soup kitchen. Work on your memoir. Take a cooking class. Or simply sleep in, like I did today. These are growth-based activities. When they match your preferences and lifestyle, you can begin to flourish. So as you know, I like the PERMA model from Martin Seligman. I think it's a useful model of well-being, and it's documented in his book, not surprisingly, called Flourish. And it suggests there are sort of these 5 paths to living a good life. P, positive emotion. I feel better today because I slept in, I got a little extra rest. E, engagement. So this is flow-like activities, writing your memoir or working on cooking a delicious meal. R, relationships, hosting that dinner party. M, meaning, volunteering at a soup kitchen. A, achievement, racing in your Tough Mudder or launching a business. Now, these aren't completely mutually exclusive. The same activity can check multiple of the paths. For example, the Tough Mudder, while being focused on achievement, could also just be fun. Getting out in fresh air and moving your body in a way that is challenging yet fun. And launching a business might be achievement focused, but it's also engaging. That is, it's a creative pursuit. And one thing to know is that what's a good life, as I said, at age 25 might not be a good life at age 50. So back then I was focused on achievement. So pursuing a career in academia and pursuing athletic achievement, competing on the lacrosse field, for example. Nowadays, I'm much more focused on P, working out to feel good, not to win games. E, engagement, I'm doing writing. I'm working on this podcast. And M, meaning, I'm trying to give back to the world. This is a resource for single people. We're starting a movement. So I'm going to be revisiting how to live a good life with an upcoming episode with a humanistic psychologist. His name is Scott Barry Kaufman, and he has a new book called Transcend that presents a model like this. It's an alternative to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which, as you probably know, is not a useful model for living a good life, at least in my opinion. And he has a similar idea, and he uses a sailboat analogy, which I like quite a lot. So I talk about foundation and flourishing. He talks about the base of the boat as security, and the sail is growth. And I like the sailboat analogy because of its similarity to the aforementioned ideas. But in particular, it's sort of compelling as you think about it, right? You want a good base. You don't want a boat that's going to tip over easily, especially when there's waves. But you also want a big sail so that you can catch wind sometimes. So, such as when you really get into a groove with your work, your hobbies, your fitness, your relationships. And also because a sailboat is a boat rather than a train, sailboats can go in any direction. That is, there's no one way to move through the ocean. So here we are. I've gone through and tried to set forth a sort of 3-part path by which to think about your single living and thinking about making some change in terms of R, recognizing that the world may not want you to thrive in this way. The second R, to rebel against that, to do what you think is right, to make that choice. And then the third R, to begin an act of reinvention, to change not only your beliefs, but your behavior, your actions, and the way you move through the world that allow you to live your best life and to basically make the opportunities as a single person work for you. So I hope this new narrative is helpful. It's still early in terms of these ideas, and I welcome feedback and discussion as I develop them. You can join the solo community. You can reach me directly on the Slack channel. I want to thank you for listening. I'm going to be back next week with a non-solo thoughts episode. And as always, I appreciate you. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.org. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.